Welcome to OK Bitcoin 69. Consider to subscribe and let's dive into today Bitcoin news.
Joining me now, Post 9, for his crypto outlook, among other things, is Anthony Scaramucci of Skybridge Capital. It's good to see you. Welcome back.
Good to be on.
What is going on? I know I ask you this every time, but it's such a volatile asset class that the question needs to be re-asked because it was at north of 70, and now here we are.
Just promise me if we get to 100,000 at the end of the year, you'll invite me back.
I definitely will.
Promise me.
I definitely will.
I won't have the basketball trophy, but you have a lot of things going on at the same time. You have the German government selling some Bitcoin. You have the Mt. Gox bankruptcy, which has been a 10-year drawn-out affair, is now going to be releasing about 140,000 Bitcoins. And so Skybridge, alongside a Fortress, participated in that. And so you have a combination of these things going on at the same time that there's been some selling pressure in the ETF. And so when that happens, Bitcoin is a volatile asset. You also had a halving, not to get into the Bitcoin jargon with you, but
I think our viewers are well versed on that.
Okay, so every time you have a halving, a result of which it forces the miners to sell some Bitcoin, keep up their revenues, which puts temporary pressure on Bitcoin, but we still love the fundamentals of Bitcoin long term. And I do think, as I said, it'll be 170,000 post-halving, but I think it can get to 100,000 by year end, but it has to chug through this slog right now. One last quick point.
Sure.
FTX is going to be releasing shortly $16 billion roughly of cash to investors that had their accounts at FTX. And so that's very good news for Bitcoin holders, I believe, because a lot of that was in Bitcoin. It got frozen in the bankruptcy. It got dollarized, unfortunately, at low numbers for Bitcoin. But it's going to go back to those account holders shortly. And we think a lot of that may flow into the assets.
Oh, I was going to ask you that. Do you think, at least for those people, right, in their minds, there's some tarnish on the story enough that they won't want to assume the risk again in crypto because of what happened to them in the first place?
We call these things life chips. If you get a windfall back like that, you were counting on not getting that money back. Now that you're getting it, you may buy a car, you may buy a house, you may buy a summer house, but I do think 40 to 50% of that will go back into the asset class. I mean, these are hardcore people. Remember, they're early adopters too. If you had an account at FTX, you have an account at Coinbase, you're considered to be an early adopter in the digital asset space. And so early adopters, have typical loyalty to the asset class.
You raise another interesting point when you mention the German government selling. How big of a risk do you think sovereigns in general are to the story? We have to figure that sovereigns are large players, right? And the ebbs and flows of government and things that happen. Is that a longer-term risk more so than people have thought about?
I don't think so, Scott, and I'll take you back to the situation, the early days of Uber. No government wanted Uber, no administrator wanted Uber, no mayor wanted Uber. All the regulators said no to Uber, but the people wanted Uber. And one thing that just happened today in the GOP platform, they're going to have their convention next week. Right there, glaringly in the GOP platform, is the protection of digital assets and the protection specifically of Bitcoin. So I think that's a huge mistake by the Democrats. I feel like they're fumbling the football on digital assets. It's not a niche business anymore. Okay, you could go by the Mike Novogratz discussion where he thinks there's 85 million wallets. I think Coinbase put out something like 50 million wallets. Let's cut those down. Let's say there's only 20 million wallets of eligible voters in the United States, and let's say 10% of them are single-issue voters. We've got 2 million potential voters in a very close, very narrow election being resolved by 6 or 7 swing states that could be single-issue digital asset voters. So to me, I think it's overwhelming conclusion that this will be an acceptable long-term asset class in the United States. And if that's the case, I'm not worried about the other sovereigns.
You're obviously well connected in the political arena. You're probably thinking about, not probably, you are, I know, thinking about
some places worse than others.
What many are thinking about
worse than others.
What's going to happen leading up to the election. What do you think? What do you hear? What's the story?
Oh, listen, I mean, I think President Biden is obviously dug in, had a poor debate performance, but it appears like he is going to be the nominee. The swing state voting right now has former President Trump in the lead. I'm a markets guy. I know you're a markets guy. The poly markets are favoring Donald Trump right now. But these things are close elections, and there's a lot to be decided right now. You have the VP process, which will come up this week. You've got another debate on September the 10th. If President Biden is staying in the race, I think he really has to demonstrate what he's been trying to do over the last couple of days. He was on Morning Joe this morning, our sister network, and he's very articulate on Morning Joe. But he's having problems putting sentences together, and I think that has to worry people. And so we'll see how all that unfolds. I think they'll have to make a decision one way or another by the end of this week.
Anthony Scaramucci discussed several key points regarding the current state and future outlook of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. 1. Recent performance and predictions. Bitcoin has seen a decline from its highs above $70,000, but Scaramucci believes it can reach $100,000 by the year end, contingent on overcoming current challenges. 2. Factors affecting Bitcoin's volatility. Recent events such as the German government releasing 140,000 Bitcoins and the impact of ETF selling pressure have contributed to Bitcoin's volatility. Additionally, he mentioned the effects of the Bitcoin halving on miner revenues. 3. FTX Cash Release. FTX releasing approximately $16 billion to investors is seen as positive news for Bitcoin holders, potentially leading to increased investments in the asset class. 4. Long-term perspective. Despite short-term challenges, Scaramucci remains optimistic about Bitcoin's long-term fundamentals, believing it will eventually surpass $170,000. 5. Political and regulatory landscape. He highlighted shifts in political attitudes towards cryptocurrencies, noting that despite regulatory challenges, public demand could drive acceptance as a mainstream asset class. Overall, Scaramucci expressed confidence in Bitcoin's future potential, but acknowledged the ongoing volatility and regulatory uncertainties that could impact its short-term performance.